What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Water Cooler Talk. My name is Caleb Turner, and I'm a sports writer at KSL.com. It is Sunday, August 10th, and we're coming at you with another episode with some updates, some headlines, and we're also going to be diving into a bit of a fun topic here in a little bit as we approach football season as well. So I'm gonna flip the structure a little bit. We're gonna start out with the soccer. Soccer has been the one thing in season, so it's kind of made up the bulk of our discussions in the meat of the podcasts in the second half or majority of these episodes over the summer. But we're gonna start with those headlines to start out the episode instead. Because, frankly, both results were losses this weekend for RSL and the Utah Royals. So not a whole lot to talk about, although they were still pretty exciting matches with some milestones and some things to talk about. We will start with the Utah Royals, who came back from their summer break. Technically, they came back the week before, but they were on the road in Orlando. So first game at America First Field for the Royals since June, and it was a tight battle against the Kansas City Current, who you might recognize from last week's episode because they recently got Ali Sentnor, the former number one pick and star with the Utah Royals, was traded to Kansas City, and just as her luck and the Royals' luck would have it, ended up right back in Utah just a week later. Exactly 1 week, was traded last Friday and came here to play on Friday night at America First Field. So an interesting battle there. Kansas City, of course, a more successful team at this time than the Royals. Obviously, that was a big reason that she wanted to go to that team. They are number one in the NWSL by a pretty wide margin, and that margin got even bigger after Friday's 1-0 win over the Royals. With a goal late in that game from Temwa Chewinga, who now is tied for the lead in the NWSL for most goals at 10. And but for most of the match, it was pretty tight. It was 0-0 at halftime. A particularly positive moment was when Chloe Lacasse was able to make her return to the field for the Utah Royals. She was coming off of an ACL injury. And she was Utah's best goal scorer last year. She led the team with 4 goals and had the team's first ever hat trick last October. And then just a week later, after that hat trick, tore her ACL, unfortunately, in an away game, and obviously was not available to start the season, but still made a pretty quick return. Under 10 months was the recovery, the time from tearing her ACL to getting back on the field in an NWSL game for Chloe Lacasse from October to late October to early August. So kudos to her. Obviously, she said that she wasn't surprised by the time frame, but I think obviously if you talk to anybody who has torn ACL at the professional sports level, coming back in under 10 months is very impressive. Coming back in anything under a year is impressive. So a big step there for the Royals to get her back, their best goal scorer, especially with Ali Sentnor now gone. She's definitely their best goal scorer because Ali was in second place on the team last year in goals. And Ali did not score against the Royals in her quick turnaround homecoming, which I think is probably for the best. It might have brought up a lot of emotions for fans and players alike if that had happened. Chloe also did not score in her return. She came very, very close on a header right at the final whistle, just before the referee blew the final whistle. Yanni Thompson sent in a really, really nice cross into the Kansas City box, and Chloe got her head to it, but it just went over. It went up instead of down. It went over the goal instead of in the goal, and she was kept off the goal sheet, off the score sheet, and the Royals were not able to get that equalizer to get a tie against the best team in the league. So unfortunately, another loss. They tied the previous week against the Orlando Pride, the second best team in the league, but took the L, unfortunately, against the Current. So the Royals remain in last place in the NWSL, heading into another home game coming up this next weekend. And then on to RSL, who unfortunately also picked up a loss, despite scoring first and scoring within 3 minutes. Xavier Gozo scoring the opening goal for RSL on the road against the New York Red Bulls of New Jersey. They play in Harrison, New Jersey at Sports Illustrated Stadium, which we came to find out. You could tell on the broadcast on TV a little bit, but Pablo Mastroeni, the coach, saying afterward that it was the worst field he has ever played on. No, I guess he wasn't technically playing, but worst field he's ever seen. Definitely professionally and possibly even at the high school and college level. So not great for Red Bulls, for people playing in that stadium. But like Gozo said, both teams had to play on the same field, so it affected them theoretically equally. Nonetheless, he was able to get that opener. Nice through ball from Diego Luna that found William Agada up top, and then Agada was able to kind of slip it laterally over to Gozo, who was sprinting into the box, and just shot it kind of right between the goalie's legs, and it flipped up and in for the opening goal. And RSL had the lead for the rest of the first half, but early in the second half, the Red Bulls came back and got a goal from Choupo-Moting. You might recognize him from his European playing days. He is from Germany, or born in Germany, I should say. I believe plays for the Cameroon national team. So he opens up and gets the equalizer for Red Bulls in the second half. And then chaos basically erupted over the final 10 to 15 minutes of the match when, excuse me if I get the order of some of these wrong, but there was the penalty called where Choupo-Moting went up and basically just lobbed the ball right at Rafael Cabral, and he was able to catch it and save it. So still tie game at that point. But then there is a bit of a kind of a wrestling, like grapple move between Diego Luna and a player on the Red Bulls. They both go to the ground, and Luna is given a yellow card. Turns out he already had a yellow card. So 2 yellows. Luna is sent off. Then they wait a little bit. There's like a weird delay. There's a free kick involved. The referee goes back to his video screen, to VAR, and ends up giving a straight red card to the player that Diego Luna apparently fouled. So they both fouled each other, I guess, when going to the ground. One was a red card, one was a yellow, or it wasn't a yellow originally, and apparently you cannot review second yellow cards on VAR. So it's kind of a whole mess there. Both teams end up down a man, playing with 10 men in stoppage time. And lo and behold, another penalty call, of course, in the box. Choupo-Moting, he makes this one, leaves little doubt about it, sends it up into the corner of the goal, and Red Bulls win. So RSL still has not won a game on the road against the Red Bulls since 2012. They've played 5 games in between. They don't play very often on the road against the Red Bulls. This was their first game since 2019, going out to New Jersey. So in limited numbers, not a large sample size there, but still, they kind of have their number, whether it be the fault of the players or the referees. I'll leave that up to you to decide if you watched that game, and if not, maybe go back and check out some of those highlights. They do an officiating review YouTube video every week on the MLS YouTube page. So in a few days, if that pops up and we see if they talk about the RSL game, I'd be curious to see what Andrew Wiebe says about the calls that were made on the field and with VAR, because there were a lot of calls, and I think there's no denying that it impacted the game because there were 2 penalties and 2 red cards. So a lot going on there. But that's it for our game updates, our headlines there. And now, I was looking for kind of some ways to spice up the podcast, bring in a little more depth to it. I feel bad maybe over the last couple weeks didn't give you guys a full offering of things to think about and discuss. So I was thinking of ways, how could I add a little more meat to the bone? And I had the thought, eventually I'd love to get to the point where you as readers and listeners of KSL.com can send in questions that you'd like us to talk about on this podcast or in other outlets on the website. And we kind of do already have a form of that with the comments on our website. So I decided to dive into the comments, possibly against my better judgment, because I think we all know how comment sections on the internet go. Typically not great, kind of devolves into arguing or unintelligent responses because people are set in their ways, feel a certain way, and likely are not going to change. But I was hoping that I might just find a little gem in there, maybe a genuine question that somebody had, or some crazy hot take or something. Well, I didn't find a lot of questions, a lot of honest questions, but I did find an interesting hot take that I think can give us a little something to tide us over until we get to real football games being played. We're still about 3 weeks out from football games being played at college football. That is, high school football starts this upcoming Thursday and Friday, I believe. We will have our first top 20 plus one poll coming out tomorrow. So to give you a hint there, we're going to talk about polls a little bit. It is poll season. As we know, the polls don't lie. And there's a lot of polls coming out. So we've got, like I mentioned, our high school poll coming out tomorrow for football. But on the college football front, the USA Today coaches poll already came out a couple weeks. I believe last week. BYU was ranked in that one at 23rd. The AP poll, which is typically seen as the more official poll, does not come out until tomorrow morning, Monday morning. So by the time you're listening to this, that poll will likely already be out, and you can take a look at that. Because BYU finished last season ranked 13 in that AP poll, which is pretty high. Now, if the coaches poll is any indication, BYU could still be ranked, possibly 23, maybe a little lower, maybe even higher. But I bring this up because our sports editor, Josh Furlong, also Utah beat writer and AP poll voter, put out his first ballot for the AP poll that's going to come out tomorrow. So he votes in that. He's one of several dozens of writers across the country that vote in that. And in the comments for that story, of course, plenty of hot takes, plenty of arguments, plenty of disagreements with why isn't BYU or Utah ranked in that, because, spoiler alert, if you haven't read Josh's ballot, he did not rank BYU or Utah in the top 25 to start the 2025 season. And one person in particular decided to throw out there that he thinks BYU should be ranked. First of all, they were ranked to finish the season. All they did was lose a quarterback. That shouldn't take them completely off the books. They keep their defense. They, still have some elite players and should still be ranked. And he predicted that BYU would be undefeated by the time BYU and Utah play in the regular season. I believe it is 6 games into their respective seasons, or they will have played 6 games. And it is Saturday, October 18th is when BYU and Utah play down in Provo. And so this particular KSL.com commenter thinks that BYU will be undefeated at that point, with their schedule up until that point being starting on August 30th against Portland State, first game. Next against Stanford, also at home in Provo. On the road against Eastern Carolina. On the road at Colorado and Deion Sanders. Now, not with his sons on the team, but Deion Sanders' team nonetheless. On the road, not a gimme game, not an easy game. Coming back to Provo to face West Virginia. Now, I guess Big 12 play starts with Colorado. So Colorado and West Virginia, Big 12 play. And then heading out on the road once again for Arizona in Big 12 play. Those 6 games before facing Utah at home at Lavelle Edwards Stadium on October 18th. So, will BYU be undefeated 6-0 at that point? Probably not. There's some tough games in there. The Big 12 in general is a competitive conference. Obviously in basketball, yes, but as we learned last year, in football as well. We got down to the final week, and there were like 3 or 4 teams vying for a conference championship game spot, BYU included. And so Arizona was in there. West Virginia is not a throwaway team either. And so, if you look at those games alone, on the road at Colorado, on the road at Arizona in Big 12 play, you think you're going 2-0 in those games? That's tough. And you think you're going 3-0 at Colorado versus West Virginia and at Arizona? Look, it's possible, certainly. BYU ended up ranked 13th last season for a reason. But those are not easy games, especially if you're still breaking in a pretty new quarterback. Obviously, there are some on that are in the competition that have experience, but not in BYU's system. McKay Hillstead was at Utah State last year. Trayson Bourget was at Western Michigan last year. And Barry Rockmeyer was in high school last year. So there's a lot of new things going on there. And you're only 6 games into the season. You're early October still. Is this broken in against a Utah team that is starting a junior quarterback? Now, given he is also new to the system, but same offensive coordinator as he had at his last school. I think there's a certain level of comfort there having the same playbook, a similar playbook at the very least there. You could argue, well, BYU has the same running back, LJ Martin, which is true. And they're, judging from what I've heard from clips posted by our guy Sean Walker on Instagram. If you're not following Rock and Royal on Instagram, make sure you check that out. That is our KSL.com BYU podcast and Instagram page. A couple clips from Aaron Roderick, who is the offensive coordinator at BYU. Very confident in their run game, in LJ Martin, in the running backs in general, that they will be pretty good as at running the ball. Now, and if the quarterback isn't fully settled in, if they can't rely on that arm to break them out, maybe they can just run the ball and become kind of a ground and pound type team. Who knows? 6-0, I think, is a bit ambitious, though. Now let's look at Utah's schedule, because I think just as much as you want to say, well, BYU is going to be 6-0 coming into that game, could Utah be 6-0 coming into that game? You return a lot of players, especially on the offensive line. You've got an experienced quarterback in there. Could Utah be 6-0? Let's take a look at their schedule. Starting also Saturday, August 30th, on the road at UCLA. Coming back to Rice-Eccles Stadium for a game against Cal Poly on September 6th. After that, we go on the road to Wyoming. Then Big 12 play starts at home at Rice-Eccles Stadium against Texas Tech. Go on the road to West Virginia, come back, play Arizona State in Salt Lake, and then head down to Provo for the game against the Cougars. In some ways, that schedule's even easier. I mean, you have 2 home Big 12 games as opposed to 2 road Big 12 games. Texas Tech and Arizona State aren't gimmies either. Obviously, I'll give you that. I don't think any game in the Big 12 is a gimme at this point. They're all competitive teams, as we saw last year. But you get them both at home. I think the most interesting question isn't whether these teams are undefeated going into the BYU-Utah game. It's what happens on Saturday, October 18th at LaVell Edwards Stadium. As we all know, that game up at Rice-Eccles in Salt Lake last year was riveting. Utah losing on a field goal. Their athletic director going into the press conference before the coach after the game and saying, this game was taken from us. That's going to be a really fascinating game. You flip the script, you go down to Provo. You're in Utah in hostile territory, but with the more experienced team, possibly at least at the quarterback position. And we'll see. We'll see if BYU's elite defense, led by Jay Hill, their defensive coordinator, how they face off against Devin Dampier and Utah and their strong offensive line. And I know the wide receiver position is still a pretty big question mark for Utah. Josh Furlong wrote about that on KSL.com. Make sure you check out that piece to see how that position group is rounding into form as fall camp continues. So there's question marks on both teams. There's strengths on both teams. It'll be fascinating to see how each one starts the season. Some good tests early for each season. I mean, hey, Utah going on the road to UCLA to start the season is a good challenge, good barometer to see where this team is at in August. Week 1, new quarterback. Where are we at here? BYU has a bit more of a soft entrance to the season. You have FCS team Portland State, and then you have Stanford coming. Both of those teams coming to Provo. Stanford in recent years not known as a football powerhouse, so it'll be interesting to see. Do those early games test BYU? Do they kind of get a soft entrance, and then hey, they head out on those 2 Big 12 games at Colorado and Arizona, and is that a reality check? come late September or early October. We shall see. One team starts a little harder, one team starts a little easier, and then it gets into the harder games. But no matter what, we get into those Big 12 games, and you're going to find out who your team is pretty quickly. I got a chance to go to one of those Big 12 games last year against Oklahoma State. Ton of fun. It went down to the wire, down to the final play at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. A lot of these games, that's just how they are. And I'm excited for football season. You get into Saturday, these games, sometimes they're blowouts, sure, but once we get into October and November, you're playing these conference games, and we're getting into some fun times. So this is just a bit of an appetizer, just a bit of a teaser to get you thinking about these teams. Obviously, we have a bit of a ways to go. Like I mentioned, those openers, not till August 30th. I did not mention Utah State yet, who is in an interesting place. They do not play a single team from the state of Utah this season. So we won't get to see how they match up against a Utah or a BYU. They'll kind of have their own journey. They have their own journey going into the Pac-12 here soon as well. And they'll be playing a lot of those types of teams. You've got your Boise States, who they become a bit of a rival with, so we got that as kind of a barometer. You've got your Fresnos, you've got your Nevada, UNLV. So could be some really fun games there still for the Aggies as they look to improve upon last season, bringing in Bronco Mendenhall. A lot of new stuff there as well. But unfortunately, we did not get to see that in-state matchup rivalry with the Aggies this year. But we do get October 18th, Utes, Cougars. So looking forward to that one. We're still 2 months out. We're still 20 days away from the games even being played. But we do have high school coming up. So check out that poll for Utah high school teams when that comes out tomorrow. Look for our coverage on Friday. We'll be doing tailgates again, which is a ton of fun. Going to a different high school every week with donuts, just to kind of get the word out about KSL and cover, hopefully, a variety of fun games and interesting teams this season as football gets ready to kick off here in the state of Utah in just 5 days. So thanks for sticking around, guys. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.